Good morning, bore da a chroeso, and welcome to this hybrid meeting of Registration and Licensing Committee on Monday, the 6th of March, 2023. I'm Councillor Anthony John Richards, and I will be chairing today's meeting. Just to make you aware that today's meeting will be recorded, and can you please ensure that your phones are switched to silent for the duration of the meeting? Would members, officers and attendees who are present in the chamber today please use their microphones when speaking, and when not speaking, can I ask that you ensure your microphone is switched to mute. If you also have any questions, please raise your hand or electronic if you're attending virtually. So agenda item 2 is declarations of interests. So are there any declarations of interest?
I see no indications, Chair.
Great, thank you. Agenda item 3 is minutes of the previous meeting. So minutes of the previous meeting held on the 13th of December 2022 are on pages 3 to 4 of the circulated agenda pack. Can I have a proposer and a seconder to approve the minutes for accuracy?
I'm happy to propose, Chair.
Yep.
I'll second.
Great, thank you very much, members. And then agenda item 4 is the decision report, revised taxi licensing policy for electric vehicles. And agenda item 4 is on pages 5 to 16 of the circulated agenda pack and is here for decision. So, Mr. Chappell, would you please introduce the report?
Yep, thank you very much, Chair. Good morning, members. So agenda item 4, this is the taxi licensing policy amendment for electric vehicles. Members will recall that in October 2022, a report was brought before this committee to consider an amendment to the existing taxi licensing policy. The existing policy, if members recall, only allows a new Hackney carriage vehicle licence to be issued for a wheelchair accessible vehicle. The proposed amendment to the policy will enable a non-wheelchair accessible electric vehicle to be licensed as a new vehicle. So at the last meeting, members determined to go out to do a consultation exercise with the trade. That was carried out between November 2022 and January 2023 and resulted in 6 responses. These responses are attached, members, at Appendix 1. I'll just very briefly refer to those if I can. Members note in the report, paragraph 15, consultation responses 1, 2 and 3 in the appendix, they simply supported the proposal. Consultation response 4, this respondent is initially against the proposal, although later suggests that he would support a change in policy if it applied to all vehicles. Consultation response 5, this respondent refers to the lack of charging infrastructure and cost of the vehicles. However, the proposal for the change in policy is simply to encourage uptake. There's no mandatory provisions being made here. It's simply down to the individual operator whether they want to take these up or not. Consultation response 6, this respondent asks a number of questions for clarification purposes. And suggests that a move to electric vehicles is premature. Again, as with consultation response 5, that this isn't a mandatory policy. It's just to encourage uptake. Officers have subsequently responded to some of the questions raised by that respondent. So the recommendation now, Chair, since there isn't opposition, or certainly not a large-scale opposition to the proposal, we recommend that we move ahead with the change to the policy, and the taxi licensing policy will be amended as shown in paragraphs 27 and 28 of the report. Appendix E, specification 8. This will now read, non-wheelchair accessible vehicles shall only be considered for licensing as a replacement for an existing non-wheelchair accessible vehicle, with the exception of fully electric vehicles, i.e. vehicles that are powered solely by battery and do not also have an internal combustion engine. And then Appendix E, specification 10, to read, new vehicle licenses will only be issued to wheelchair accessible vehicles and fully electric vehicles, And then again, i.e. vehicles that are powered solely by battery and do not also have an internal combustion engine. The existing taxi licensing policy has been listed as a background paper, Chair. Thanks.
Great, diolch yn fawr. Thank you very much, Mr Chapel. Do members have any questions in regard to the report? Yep, okay. So if we could go to Councillor Sarah Thomas first, please.
Hi, yeah. So what I was wondering was, do we know how many of our existing electric vehicles have wheelchair access now? I realise it doesn't quite come in effect this, but I'm just curious.
Yeah, so currently the council has one fully electric vehicle licensed. That vehicle is not wheelchair accessible. It was put on as a replacement for an existing saloon, which is permitted within the policy.
Okay, so what I'm wondering is not now, but in the future, we might get to a position where we have lots of electric vehicles, no, or a lot less diesel vehicles, and no lower level of wheelchair access. So I assume that we would look to review this again in the future when we've got more electric vehicles, would we?
Yeah, it was in the previous report. What I suggested we do is that officers will monitor the uptake of electric vehicles on a monthly basis.
Okay.
And should we see a pattern of wheelchair accessible vehicles being taken off the road and replaced by non-wheelchair accessible electric vehicles, then we'll bring a report back before members and we'll look to review that policy.
Brilliant. Thank you very much.
Great, thank you, Councillor Thomas. Councillor Matthew Crowley, please.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Thank you for the report, Neil. It makes sense. I mean, I can see in the literature from the report by 2040 we're going to try and get all electric vehicles. I currently have an electric vehicle, and the respondent number 6 in the consultation makes a fair point about the infrastructure in terms of charging, etc. So that was a key point of being a electric vehicle user now for the last year. I get his angst there. What would be useful as a background paper, if you can supply it after the event to us, Neil. Obviously, Council before me made a good point in terms of could we have a list of operators? We don't need their names, but just a company name, perhaps a phone number alongside it. That's always happy. And then to break down what vehicles they've got in terms of disabled, etc., etc. I myself got a slight disability, and it would be useful to know who have got the disabled vehicles, and more importantly, which ones can carry a mobility scooter would be useful. I think that would be something useful on the council's website as well, Neil, on your website, perhaps taking it forward. But these are just suggestions to try and improve the customer, client, stroke, constituents, users, where they can go to get information rather than phoning around. I don't know if that exists. If it does, shoot me. But I think that'll be useful going forward. Thanks, Neil. Thanks, Chair.
Yeah, Mr. Chapel.
Thank you, Chair. The legislation in the Equality Act brought in some changes which requires the local authority to publish a list of designated vehicles. If you have a designated vehicle, then you have a duty to carry out the functions within the Equality Act, and that is to carry passengers in wheelchairs, and also to take guide dogs in the vehicles. So these were introduced relatively recently, but as part of that, it means that we have to publish a list on the council's website. So that list is updated monthly. The list of designated vehicles or wheelchair accessible vehicles is there. What it doesn't have is, I don't believe it has contact telephone numbers. It has a list of the operators. So it has the operator's name, but not a telephone number. But that potentially is something that we could look at, Councillor.
If I could go back, Chair, with your indulgence,
yes, of course.
That's grateful. I don't know where to go for it. I'm sorry about that. But of course, it's like if you're looking for a taxi on a Saturday night, I don't know whether any of you've done it, but you know, you scratch it through your phone, etc., etc. That's great. I got a 6 or 7 taxi numbers in my phone. But what I'm saying is, you never answered the one about the actual ones that can carry a mobility scooter. So I just like to understand, because there's lots of people who like, you know, particularly the older generation, and I mean that very nicely, would want to get a little carry-on sort of mobility scooter, the real small ones. They are, you know, flexible enough to fold away. And you know, I'd like to see the numbers on the website, and B, particularly which ones identify taking wheelchairs and particularly scooters. Thanks, Neil.
Yeah, I think it's something I can go away and have a look at. The ramps that are on wheelchair accessible vehicles will have a working load specified on them. We don't have that information. I know we don't have that in the office. So it may be something we'll need to work with the taxi operators to see which ones can and cannot take mobility scooters, because obviously they are much heavier. And we have had reports before that some mobility scooters, when they're going up the ramps, you can physically see the ramps bending. So as long as it's a safe working load on the ramps, then that should be okay. But we haven't got that information available to us in the council at the moment. And if we wanted to put that on the website, we'd have to bring the operators on board, try and obtain that information and then publish it.
Great, thank you, Mr. Chappell. Mr. Crowley, Councillor Crowley, are you happy with that response?
So just to come back slightly, Neil, I appreciate all what you just said, but I think it should be a part of the licensing condition now then, that they fully cooperate with us and, you know, give us that information in order so the general public at large gets all the information in one spot, you know. Thanks, Neil.
Great, and Mr. Chappell will look into that for us. So thanks for that, Councillor Crowley. A question from the Chamber. So we've got Councillor Suzanne Paddison, please.
Thank you very much, Chair. Yeah, very pleased to see this report. As a council, we've declared the climate emergency, so we should not be putting barriers in anybody's way who wants to use sustainable electric vehicles. And I'm very pleased to see that the consultation didn't throw up any hammers to throw in the works. So once again, we are doing the best for the people of Neath Talbot. We are allowing the taxi drivers to sort of have that flexibility then, so that they don't have to fit the 2 boxes at the same time, because I can imagine, I don't even know if it's going to be more expensive or if it's just not something that electric vehicles are designed at the moment to do. So we are allowing taxi drivers the freedom of being able to use electric vehicles, which is good for everybody, whilst at the same time keeping an eye on people who use them for disability reasons, and making sure that we bring it back and assess how it's going. I mean, in time, possibly vehicle manufacturers will be thinking about people who want to turn the vehicles into taxis, and there may be a cheaper way of doing it. But at the moment, it seems like it's one way or the other. So at least as a council, we're trying to fit everybody in and allow them the choice. So I'm very pleased to see the report today.
Great, thank you very much, Councillor Paddison. Any other questions from any members, please? No? Okay, so the report is here for decision, and the recommendations can be found on page 8. Can I have a proposer and a seconder, please?
Happy to propose, Chair.
Thank
I'm
you.
happy to second.
Yeah, and we've got a few people seconding, so thank you very much. Is everybody happy with that recommendation? Yep.
Thank you, Chair. I can confirm the report has been approved.
Thank you very much, Sarah. So moving on then to agenda item 5, which is urgent items. Now, I do have one urgent item today, which is a report on the new home border licence, Happy Tales. The report is here for decision and can be found on pages 1 to 22 of the supplementary agenda pack. So can I hand over to Mr. Chappell to please introduce the report?
Yeah, thank you again, Chair. So this is the urgent item, and it's an application for an animal boarding establishment licence. The premises is going to be called Happy Tales. The applicant being Laura Parry, the address being Edge Hill, Kairis, the road in Neath. Members will note from the report that an inspection of the premises by the council's approved veterinary surgeon was carried out on the 27th of February 2023. Officers have subsequently attended at the premises, and they've confirmed that all the actions which are detailed at the end of the report have now been completed. Ordinarily, this licence would now be issued under delegated authority by officers. It wouldn't usually come before members, but in this particular case, there is a 7-year-old child who lives at the premises, and therefore the applicant can't comply with the council's adopted conditions. The council adopted standard home boarding conditions in 2010, and these are attached to Appendix 2. The conditions adopted were the LACORS model licensing conditions. I believe LACORS was Local Authority Coordinators of Regulatory Services. It's no longer operational, but these were adopted in 2010. Most local authorities in Wales adopted them as they were published. However, this council determined that one of the conditions, which related to children at licensed premises, would be changed, and that was following a consultation exercise with the trade and interested persons, and it was Blue Cross Pet Charity. I was looking back at the report from 26th of October 2010. They made a suggestion that that be changed to 10, and the vet at the time simply responded as agreed. So that went through. That is our policy. Members will note that in England, where new legislation has already been implemented, they have regulations in place there, which is the most up-to-date regulations. And in respect of children at premises, their wording is that it's where an under 16-year-old resides at the home, there must be procedures in place to regulate the interactions between dogs and that person. Now, it's likely that once Wales introduces its own new legislation in respect of animal boarding, then that will be the wording that is used in Wales. I expected that things would have moved on a little bit quicker than they are. I don't think there's any plans, certainly not immediate plans for new legislation in Wales. So we have to consider each application at the moment based on our policy and whether we depart from that policy. So members will note in the veterinary surgeon's report that she's mentioned that consideration should be given to a risk assessment approach to include trial sessions and regulating interactions between her child and any dogs boarded. With this in mind, if members are satisfied to grant the licence, then it is suggested that the condition which is in the English regulations is simply pulled out and applied in this particular case. Just for reference also, members, there was a previous application along the similar lines to this, which we approved, and we implemented the same condition on that licence. Thank you, Chair.
Great, diolch yn fawr, Mr Chappell. Thank you very much. Members, are there any questions for Mr Chappell? Councillor Suzanne Paterson, please.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I remember the previous one, and in the first instance, I went, "Whoa, hang on now, these children are underage." I'm going back to the previous one, not this one. And as was explained by the person who wanted to run it, they were the parent, they were professional, they were fully aware of what was the risk, and they were working closely with members of licensing for the authority. So we haven't had any problems with it. So I'm happy to sort of support this one again under those not conditions, but you know what I mean, under the conditions that we've spoken to them, and they're going to be cognizant of the risk. So yeah, thanks.
Great, thank you very much, Councillor Paterson. I wasn't a member of the committee at that time, but I did watch back on YouTube when I was doing research to come onto this committee, and I saw that case. So Great, thank you. Councillor Andrew Dacey, please.
Thanks, Chair. I just wanted to, precedent has been set and we've had no problems from the previous occupant who've done a similar thing. Just confirm
That's
that.
correct, yeah.
Right, okay, thank you. No, happy days.
Fab, thank you. Any other questions from any members? Oh, Councillor Sarah Thomas, please.
So I wasn't aware of the previous application, but I'm assuming there would be limited contact between any children and dogs boarding there anyway, wouldn't there?
Yeah. The risk assessment would need to specify what sort of interactions the children are likely to have with the boarded dogs and any separations that they would have there. The vet actually points out in this report that the house is quite well segregated, so the child shouldn't have that much contact with the dog, and there will be a trial familiarization period which we'd expect to be implemented as well. The children are certainly not allowed to walk the dogs, so they don't form part of the business. They just simply reside at the house.
And if I can come back in, Chair?
Yes, of course, Councillor Thomas.
So I would assume that there'd be some sort of assessment intake of any dogs that are boarding there as to their character, and that would be part of. I imagine the parent is not going to want the child to be exposed to anything dangerous anyway. To just make sure that we're ticking all the boxes here. They would ask about the nature of the dog before it's dropped off.
Yeah, again, that'll form part of the risk assessment that the premises will have to implement. The purpose of doing the risk assessment is twofold. It's to protect the child, but it's also to protect the dog from any children who may tease
Stress it out.
Yeah, exactly.
Brilliant. Thank you.
Great, thank you very much, members. Any other questions? Yeah, and if we can go back to Mr. Chappell.
It's just in relation to the report, Chair. Let me find it. Yeah, so paragraph 14, bottom of page 2, it suggested condition there is a documented trial with each dog, and the licensee's child must be carried out prior to boarding to assess the risks posed by individual dogs to her child and by her child to individual dogs. The condition that I think that we should impose is not actually that wording. It's the wording that's in the English regulations. So it's all encompasses sort of an overarching statement where it's about doing a risk assessment, and that familiarization period will be within the risk assessment. So it's what I said earlier. I will read it out just once more so you can make a determination on it. It's where an under 16-year-old resides at the home, there must be procedures in place to regulate the interactions between dogs and that person.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chappell. Diolch yn fawr. So as mentioned previously, the report is here for a decision. Obviously, given with what Mr. Chappell has just said, any other thoughts, or would anybody like to put forward a proposal? Councillor Whitelock.
I propose we move the proposal, Chair. With Neath's conditions added, yes.
Yeah. Oh, sorry, my microphone went off. So we have one proposer with Neil's condition added, Mr. Chappell's condition added, and Councillor Susan Patterson is happy to second that as well. So are all members in agreement?
Yes, thank you, Chair. I can confirm that the report has been agreed.
Thank you very much, Sarah. Okay, so agenda item 6 is access to meetings. So we're now going into the private items. Now that pursuant to section 100A(4) and 5 of the Local Government Act 1972, the public be excluded from the following items of business which involve the likely disclosure of exempt information as defined in paragraph 12 and 15 of Part 4 of Schedule 12A of the above Act. Sarah, can you please confirm that the recording has stopped?